Sometimes the heaviest doors we close are the ones to our childhood homes. I'm about to share something I've carried for nearly 6 decades. A story about love, loss, and the price of choosing your own path. It's not an easy story to tell, even now, but perhaps that's exactly why it needs to be told. My name is Elizabeth Chen. I'm 79 years old, and I've been a piano teacher for most of my life. These hands, weathered and marked by time, have taught hundreds of students to find beauty in Bach and passion in Beethoven. But before I was Mrs. Chen, before these silver braids and laugh lines, I was Elizabeth Whitmore, daughter of one of Boston's most prominent attorneys, heir to a legacy that stretched back generations. That girl doesn't exist anymore. She disappeared the day I chose love over lineage, and I never looked back. Let me take you to Boston, 1966. The world was changing, the Beatles were everywhere, hemlines were rising, young people were questioning everything their parents held sacred. But in some corners of society, particularly in the old money neighborhoods of Beacon Hill, change moved at a glacial pace. That's where I grew up, in a 4-story brownstone that my great-grandfather had built, where every piece of furniture had a pedigree, and every conversation was carefully modulated to maintain appearances. I was 20 years old that spring, a junior at the Boston Conservatory of Music. My father, James Whitmore, was senior partner at Whitmore and Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. My mother, Eleanor, came from the Cabot family. Yes, those Cabots. Our summers were spent in Martha's Vineyard, our winters included the social season, and my future was supposed to include marriage to someone from our circle, probably a young lawyer or businessman whose family tree could be traced back to the Mayflower. I was good at piano. Very good. It was the one thing in my life that was truly mine, where I could express something beyond the polite, measured emotions that were expected of a Whitmore daughter. When I played, I could be angry, joyful, devastated, ecstatic, all the things that proper young ladies weren't supposed to be in 1966 Boston society. That April, the conservatory brought in a guest lecturer for a month-long residency. His name was David Chen, and he was 35 years old, a concert pianist and composer from San Francisco. I remember the first time I heard him play. It was a Friday afternoon. The recital hall was packed with students and faculty, and he performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto number 2 with an orchestra of conservatory musicians. When his hands first touched the keys, something shifted in the room. It wasn't just technical brilliance, though he had that in spades. It was the way he made the piano sing, made it weep, made it thunder with emotion so raw that I found tears streaming down my face without realizing I was crying. The entire hall sat in absolute silence after the final note, that rare moment when applause seems inadequate. When it finally came, it was thunderous. After the performance, I did something completely out of character for shy, proper Elizabeth Whitmore. I went backstage and knocked on the door to the practice room where he was packing up his sheet music. "Mr. Chen," my voice was shaking, "I'm Elizabeth Whitmore. I'm a student here, and I wondered if I could ask you about the Bach-Goldberg variations. I'm working on them for my senior recital next year, and the way you approach the aria in your recording." He looked up and smiled. He had kind eyes, deep and thoughtful, with crinkles at the corners that suggested he smiled often. "Please, call me David." And yes, of course. "Come in." We talked for 3 hours. What started as a discussion about Glenn Gould's interpretation versus Rosalind Turek's evolved into a conversation about music as language, about how Chinese calligraphy and Western musical notation were both attempts to capture the ineffable on paper. He showed me how to write my name in Chinese characters, explained the philosophy behind each stroke. He told me about his parents, who had immigrated from Guangdong province in the 1920s, how his father had worked in a laundry while teaching him Mandarin and traditional music at night, how his mother had sold vegetables in Chinatown and saved every penny for his piano lessons. Music was my bridge, he said, between their world and mine, between the old country and the new one, between who they expected me to be and who I became. I understood that more than he knew. I was also caught between expectations and authenticity, though my prison was gilded and his had been made of economic hardship. I found excuses to attend every one of his lectures. I volunteered to turn pages during his performances. I asked increasingly elaborate questions just to have a reason to talk to him, and he, God bless him, was patient and kind, answering every query as if I'd asked something profound. It was May when he first asked me to coffee. Just coffee, after a particularly long discussion about Debussy's use of whole-tone scales. We went to a little cafe near the conservatory, and we talked until they literally turned the chairs upside down on the tables around us. "I should let you go," David said, checking his watch. "It's nearly midnight. Won't your family worry?" "I'm 20 years old," I said, with all the conviction of someone who had no idea how young 20 really was. "I can take care of myself." He smiled, but there was something sad in it. "Elizabeth, may I call you Elizabeth?" "I wish you would." Everyone calls me Lizzie, actually. Except my parents. "Lizzie." He said it carefully, as if tasting the syllables. "You're very talented. And very sheltered, I think. Has anyone ever told you that?" "Sheltered?" I felt defensive. "I've traveled all over Europe. I speak French. I've been to—" "That's not what I mean." He stirred his cold coffee absently. "I mean, you have a gentleness about you. An innocence. The world hasn't touched you yet, not really. It's beautiful, but it also makes me want to protect you from... From what? From people like me, maybe." I didn't understand then what he meant. I do now. We started seeing each other regularly, though neither of us called it dating. We'd meet at the library to study scores together. We'd attend concerts and dissect every interpretation afterward over cheap wine in his tiny apartment near Fenway Park. He introduced me to Chinese poetry, to the concept of Yuan Fen, the idea that relationships are predestined, that invisible threads connect people across time and space. I showed him my favorite hidden gardens in the public garden, taught him the backstories of Boston's old families, gossip I'd absorbed at 1,000 dinner parties and charity galas. It was June when he kissed me. We were in his apartment looking at a collection of Chinese paintings he'd inherited from his grandmother. He was explaining the symbolism of plum blossoms, how they bloom in winter, how they represent resilience and hope, when he stopped mid-sentence and looked at me with such intensity that I forgot to breathe. "Lizzie," he said quietly, "I need to stop pretending this is just friendship. I'm in love with you. Deeply, completely, impossibly in love with you. And I know I shouldn't be because you're 20 and I'm 35, and you're from Beacon Hill and I'm from Chinatown, and your parents would—" I kissed him. It was my first real kiss, and it was everything every song and poem had promised it would be. We spent that summer in a bubble of joy that felt immune to reality. When I went home to Beacon Hill, I told my parents I was staying late at the conservatory to practice. Instead, I was with David, walking along the Charles River, attending jazz clubs in his neighborhood, cooking simple meals in his kitchen while he told me stories about growing up between two cultures. "My parents wanted me to marry a nice Chinese girl," he told me one evening as we chopped vegetables for stir-fry. "Someone who understood the old ways, who could speak Cantonese, who would give them grandchildren who looked like the family they'd left behind." And I tried. I dated a few women from the community, even got engaged once when I was 26. My stomach dropped. What happened? I realized I was trying to make my parents happy instead of making myself happy. She was a lovely person, but we had nothing in common except our heritage. I broke it off. It devastated my mother. She didn't speak to me for a year. Did she forgive you? Eventually. She died in 1963. My father passed 2 years later. But before she died, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "David, I was wrong to try to choose your wife. But please choose someone who will love you for who you are, not what you can give her." He looked at me then, and I knew what he wasn't saying, that he worried I didn't understand what I'd be giving up if I chose him. But I was 20 and in love, and I was certain that love conquered all. The bubble burst in November. Thanksgiving, to be precise. I'd been dropping hints to my parents about someone special. My mother had assumed I meant Richard Thornton, the son of my father's law partner, who'd taken me to a few charity events. When I corrected her, "No, Mother, not Richard. His name is David. David Chen. He's a pianist." She'd gone very quiet. "Chen," she'd repeated. "Is that Chinese?" "He's American," I'd said. "Born in San Francisco. His parents immigrated before he was born." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. "I'd like to bring him to Thanksgiving dinner," I'd said, my heart pounding. "I want you and Daddy to meet him." Another pause. Then, "Of course, dear. If he's important to you, we'd love to meet him." I should have known. My mother's voice had been too bright, too carefully neutral. David knew better. "Lizzie, are you sure about this?" he'd asked when I told him. "I don't want to cause problems with your family." "It's 1966, I'd said confidently. "The Civil Rights Act passed 2 years ago. People are more open-minded now, and besides, when they meet you, when they see how talented you are, how intelligent, how kind, they'll love you." Oh, the naivete of youth. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and grey. David wore his best suit, a slightly worn but well-pressed navy number that he'd bought for concerts. I wore a cream-coloured dress my mother had bought me at Feline's, and a string of pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. We took the T to Beacon Hill, walking the last few blocks hand in hand until we reached my family's brownstone. The door was opened by Agnes, our housekeeper, who'd been with us since I was a child. She smiled at me warmly, but her eyes flickered to David with something that might have been sympathy. "They're in the parlour, Miss Elizabeth," she said quietly. My parents were standing when we entered, my father by the fireplace, my mother on the settee. They looked like they were posing for a portrait, the picture of old Boston propriety. "Mother, Daddy," I said, my voice unnaturally high. "This is David Chen." David, my parents, James and Eleanor Whitmore. David extended his hand to my father. "Mr. Whitmore, it's an honor to meet you. Lizzie speaks so highly of you both." My father looked at David's hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. "Mr. Chen." My mother didn't offer her hand at all. "Please, sit," she said, gesturing vaguely at the furniture. Dinner was excruciating. We sat at the formal dining table, my parents at either end, David and I on one side, my mother's sister, Aunt Caroline, and her husband on the other. The conversation, when there was any, consisted of my desperate attempts to engage everyone on neutral topics. "David just returned from a concert tour in California," I said brightly. "He performed at Davies Symphony Hall in San Francisco." "How nice," my mother said, pushing her turkey around her plate. "He's also composing a piano concerto. It incorporates elements of Chinese folk music with Western classical forms. It's absolutely brilliant." "Elizabeth," my father interrupted, "your mother mentioned you're considering graduating a semester early. Is that wise? Rushing your education?" "I'm not rushing anything. I'm ahead on my credits, and my advisor thinks—" "I was asking about your academic judgment, not your advisor's opinion." The meal continued like that. Every attempt I made to include David in the conversation was either ignored or redirected. David, to his credit, remained gracious, complimenting the food, asking polite questions that were met with monosyllabic responses. When Agnes brought out the pumpkin pie, my mother suddenly stood. "I have a terrible headache. James, would you bring me my pills from upstairs?" It was an obvious ploy, but my father rose immediately. "Of course, dear. Elizabeth, come help me find them." I followed my father upstairs to my parents' bedroom, my stomach churning with dread. He closed the door and turned to face me. His face was red, a vein throbbing in his temple. The look he got before he destroyed a witness on the stand. Elizabeth, what the hell is this? What is what, Daddy? Don't play dumb. That Chinese man downstairs. What are you thinking? His name is David, and I'm thinking that I love him. Love? He spat the word like it was something distasteful. You're 20 years old. You don't know the first thing about love. I know enough to recognize it when I feel it. You feel infatuation, rebellion, the thrill of doing something your parents wouldn't approve of. This is a phase, Elizabeth, and I won't let you ruin your life because of it. Ruin my life? David is a brilliant musician, a kind person, He's a 35-year-old Chinaman with no prospects beyond playing piano in cocktail lounges. I felt like he'd slapped me. That's not true. He teaches, he composes, he performs in concert halls. He's not one of us, Elizabeth. My father's voice dropped to a deadly calm. The Whitmores have a certain standing in this city. A reputation. Standards. We don't associate with those people. Those people. My voice was shaking now, with anger more than fear. Daddy, do you hear yourself? This is 1966, not 1866. The world is changing. Not my world. Not this family. He stepped closer, towering over me the way he had when I was a little girl who'd misbehaved. You will end this relationship immediately. You will finish your degree, and then we'll find you a suitable husband. Someone from a good family. Someone who can provide the life you're accustomed to. What if I don't want that life? Then you're more foolish than I thought. He moved to the door, then turned back. I'm going to say this once, Elizabeth. As long as you live under my roof, as long as you use my money, you will abide by my rules. If you choose that man over your family, you choose poverty, disgrace, and exile. Your mother and I will not support this union. We will not acknowledge it. We will not speak to you again. Is that clear? I felt like I was falling, like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. You can't mean that. I've never been more serious in my life. Choose. Now. I thought of David downstairs, enduring the cold politeness of my extended family. I thought of the life my father was describing, the suitable husband, the charity committees, the summers in Martha's Vineyard, the slow suffocation of becoming Eleanor Whitmore Jr. I choose David, I whispered. My father's face hardened into something I'd never seen before. Then you are no longer my daughter. Get your things and get out of my house. Daddy, please. Now. I went downstairs on shaking legs. David took one look at my face and stood immediately. Lizzie, what happened? We need to go, I said. Now. He didn't ask questions until we were outside, standing in the cold November air on Mount Vernon Street. Then I broke down completely, telling him everything between sobs. Oh, Lizzie. He held me, right there on the street corner, not caring who might see. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to come between you and your family. You didn't, I said fiercely. They did. They're the ones who can't see past their own prejudice. What are you going to do? I looked up at him, this man I'd known for only 7 months, but who felt like the other half of my soul. I'm going to pack my things. I'm going to find a place to stay. And I'm going to choose my own life. Are you sure? Lizzie, if you need time to think. I've never been more sure of anything. And I was. In that moment, standing on that cold street corner, I was absolutely certain. It would take years before the certainty was tested by reality, before I understood the true weight of what I'd chosen. But at 20 years old, with my whole life ahead of me and my heart full of love, I believed that was enough. I moved out that night. David helped me pack a single suitcase of clothes and books. My mother stayed in her room, and I could hear her crying. My father stood in his study doorway, watching silently as I descended the stairs for the last time. "If you walk out that door," he said, "there's no coming back." I stopped, turned to look at him one last time. I know. I used the small amount of money I'd saved from summer jobs and teaching piano to rent a room in a boarding house in Cambridge. It was a tiny space, just enough room for a bed and a desk, with a shared bathroom down the hall. I'd gone from a 4-story brownstone in Beacon Hill to a single room in a building that smelled of cabbage and old cigarettes. I'd never been happier. David and I married in June of 1967 in a simple civil ceremony at Cambridge City Hall. Our witnesses were 2 fellow musicians, a violinist named Sarah and a cellist named Marcus. I wore a simple white dress I'd bought on sale at Jordan Marsh. David wore the same suit he'd worn to Thanksgiving dinner. We exchanged rings, thin gold bands that cost $35 together, and promised to love each other in sickness and health, for richer or poorer. We laughed at that part because we were definitely choosing poorer. I'd sent my parents an invitation. It came back with "return to sender" written across the envelope in my father's handwriting. I tried calling. My mother answered once and started crying, then hung up. After that, the housekeeper would say they weren't available. I wrote letters. They went unanswered. For a while, I told myself they just needed time, that eventually they'd realize they were wrong, that they'd want to meet David, to see how happy we were. I was wrong. We built a life together, David and I. He took a job as a piano tuner, steady work that paid the bills, and played weekend gigs at a jazz club in Boston. I taught piano to neighborhood kids in our tiny apartment. Money was always tight. Some months we chose between heating and groceries. But we had music, we had each other, and somehow that was enough. In early 1968, I discovered I was pregnant. I was terrified and ecstatic in equal measure. We could barely afford to feed ourselves, and now there would be 3 of us. I wrote to my parents, a long letter telling them about the baby, about how scared I was, about how much I wished they could be part of this. I told them I understood if they couldn't forgive me yet, but surely they'd want to know their grandchild. I received a response, but not from my parents. It was from my father's lawyer, a man I'd known since childhood, who used to give me peppermints when I visited Daddy's office. "Dear Miss Whitmore," it began. Not Mrs. Chen, I noticed. "I write at the instruction of Mr. James Whitmore to inform you that you have been formally disowned and removed from all family trusts and inheritance documents. Mr. Whitmore requests that you cease all contact with the Whitmore family. Any future correspondence will be returned unopened. Any attempts to contact family members will be considered harassment and may result in legal action." I read it 3 times before I understood what it really meant. My father would rather pretend I was dead than accept my marriage. I cried for 3 days. David held me, brought me tea, told me it would be okay. But we both knew something had broken that couldn't be fixed. Michael James Chen was born on September 15th, 1969. He had David's dark hair and my light eyes, and he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I sent my parents a birth announcement and photos. They were returned unopened. 2 years later came Sarah Eleanor Chen, named for both our mothers, a peace offering that was never acknowledged, more photos, more letters, all returned. Every Christmas I sent cards with photos of the children. Michael's first steps, Sarah's first day of kindergarten. Both of them at the piano, following in our footsteps. I never got a response, but I kept sending them. It became a ritual, a way of saying, "I haven't forgotten you, even if you've forgotten me." In 1975, I was reading the Globe over breakfast when I saw my mother's obituary. Eleanor Cabot Whitmore, aged 56, had died of a heart attack. The funeral had already taken place, at Trinity Church, where I'd been baptized, where I'd attended services every Sunday growing up. I hadn't known she was sick, I hadn't been notified, I hadn't been given a chance to say goodbye. I went to the cemetery anyway, Mount Auburn, where the Cabots and Whitmores had been buried for generations. I found her grave, fresh flowers everywhere, the earth still dark and newly turned. I knelt in the grass, not caring about my dress. and talked to her. "Mama," I whispered, "I wanted you to meet them. Michael is 6 now, so smart, so funny. Sarah is 4 and she has your eyes. Did you know that? She loves music like we do. I wanted you to teach her the pieces you taught me. I wanted." My voice broke. "I just wanted you to know I'm okay. That I'm happy. That choosing love didn't destroy me like Daddy thought it would." I left white roses, her favorite, and went home. The next day I received a letter from my father's attorney. If I trespassed on family property or harassed the family at the cemetery again, legal action would be taken. I stopped writing letters after that. What was the point? Life went on. We moved to a slightly bigger apartment when David got a teaching position at a community music school. We saved and scrimped and eventually bought a small house in Quincy. The kids grew up. Michael showed an aptitude for science, Sarah for music. We couldn't afford vacations to Martha's Vineyard, but we had day trips to Revere Beach. We couldn't afford the latest toys, but our house was always full of music. I tried not to think about what I'd given up. But sometimes I'd see mothers and daughters shopping together, or grandparents at children's recitals, and the loss would hit me like a physical pain. In 1982, I read that my father had remarried, a widow named Patricia Hardwick, from an appropriate family. She was 45, he was 68. I wondered if she knew about me, if he'd told her he had a daughter he'd disowned. The years passed. 1989. My father retired from the law firm. I read about it in the business section. 1992. His 70th birthday was celebrated with a gala at the Four Seasons. There was a photo in the society pages, my father, his wife Patricia, and a young man who looked to be in his 20s. The caption identified him as James Whitmore Jr., son of Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. I had a half-brother I'd never met. He would have been born around 1970, while I was sending photos of Michael that went unopened. My father had replaced me with a more acceptable child. It shouldn't have hurt anymore. 25 years had passed. I had my own family, my own life. But it did hurt. It always would. On February 14th, 1995, my father died. He was 73. The obituary in the Globe was extensive. Prominent attorney, pillar of the community, beloved husband and father. It listed Patricia as his wife, James Jr. as his son. I wasn't mentioned. The funeral was held at Trinity Church. I went, standing in the very back, wearing black and a veil. The church was packed with judges, politicians, society figures. My half-brother delivered the eulogy, calling our father a man of unwavering principles, a champion of justice, a devoted family man. I almost laughed. Unwavering principles. Yes, that was one way to describe a man who disowned his only daughter for marrying someone he deemed beneath her. I didn't stay for the reception. I just needed to say goodbye. Not to the father who'd rejected me, but to the one I'd once loved, who'd taught me to ride a bike and taken me to my first symphony, and told me I could be anything I wanted to be. That father had died a long time ago, on a November evening in 1966. The years that followed were quieter. Michael became a doctor, specializing in pediatrics. Sarah became a music therapist, working with children with special needs. They married good people who loved them. They gave us grandchildren, 5 in total, each one a miracle. David and I grew old together. We celebrated our 30th anniversary, then our 40th. His hair turned white. My hands developed arthritis that made playing piano painful. But we still made music together. Him at the piano, me singing the old standards we both loved. In 2010, David was diagnosed with lung cancer. He'd never smoked a day in his life, but sometimes the universe is cruel. We had 8 months from diagnosis to death. 8 months to say everything we needed to say, to hold hands and remember 43 years of marriage, to prepare for the goodbye we'd known was coming, but hoped we'd have more time before. On his last day, in hospice, he held my hand and asked, "Lizzie, did I give you a happy life? even though you lost so much. I looked at this man, my partner, my love, my best friend, and I knew the answer with absolute certainty. You gave me everything that mattered. He smiled. Good. That's all I wanted. Everything that mattered. Those were his last words. After David died, the house felt too empty. I sold it and moved into a small condo near Sarah. I kept teaching piano because stopping would have meant giving up music, and I couldn't do that. Music was how David and I had met, how we'd communicated, how we'd loved each other. I'm 79 now, the same age David was when he died. Sometimes I sit at my piano and play the pieces we used to perform together, and I can almost feel him next to me, turning the pages, smiling at the particularly tricky passages. My walls are covered with photos, David and me at our simple wedding, the kids at various ages, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, but there are no photos of my parents, not because I threw them away in anger, but because they chose not to be in my life. I can't force a relationship with ghosts. Still, sometimes late at night I play Chopin, my mother's favorite composer, and I wonder, did she regret it? Did my father, in his final days, think about the daughter he'd sacrificed to his pride? Last year I got my answer. There was a knock on my door one Sunday afternoon. I opened it to find a young woman, maybe 23 or 24, with brown hair and nervous eyes. Mrs. Chen? Elizabeth Whitmore Chen? Yes? I'm Olivia Whitmore, James Whitmore Jr.'s daughter. I think I'm your niece. I invited her in. We sat in my small living room drinking tea, and she told me her story. Her father, my half-brother, had recently told her about me. The aunt we lost, he'd called me. He'd been 8 when our father died, old enough to remember references to a sister who'd been disgraced, who was never spoken of. I had to meet you, Olivia said. I had to know the real story. We talked for hours. I told her everything. Falling in love with David, my father's ultimatum, the years of silence. She listened, tears streaming down her face. That's horrible, she whispered. I can't believe he did that to you. It was a different time, I said, though the words felt hollow. Interracial marriage was illegal in many states. People were less accepting. That's not an excuse, Olivia said fiercely. He was your father. He should have loved you more than his stupid prejudices. Before she left, she gave me a box. I found these when we were cleaning out my grandmother Patricia's house. She died last year. I think you should have these. Inside the box were all the photos I'd sent over 30 years, every Christmas card, every picture of the children, 30+ years of my life, carefully preserved in chronological order, though never acknowledged. Grandmother Patricia told me that grandfather kept them in his study, Olivia said softly. She said sometimes she'd find him looking at them, especially toward the end. She said he was too proud to reach out, but he never forgot you. I held those photos, proof that I hadn't been completely erased, that some part of him had kept me alive, even if only in secret, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Pride. That single word defined my father's life and destroyed our relationship. Pride kept him from admitting he was wrong. Pride prevented him from meeting his grandchildren. Pride robbed him of 30 years of knowing his daughter. And in the end, what did his pride give him? A lonely death, surrounded by people who respected his position but never knew his heart. He died without ever holding Michael or Sarah, without seeing them grow into remarkable adults, without knowing the legacy of love he could have been part of. Olivia visits regularly now. She's brought my half-brother to meet me, an awkward emotional reunion between siblings who are strangers. He apologized for our father, for not seeking me out sooner. I told him it wasn't his fault. Children can't fix their parents' mistakes. Through Olivia, I've learned more about my father's last years. After my mother died, he became harder, colder. His second marriage was cordial, but loveless. James Jr. grew up trying desperately to please a man who was never satisfied, who set impossible standards and met every achievement with criticism. He was miserable, James told me. I don't think he was happy a single day of his life. And I realized I won, not because I wanted to, not because I tried to, but because I chose happiness over hate, love over pride, connection over status. I built a life full of warmth and music and laughter. My father built a life full of respect and status and silence. People ask me if I regret my choice. Losing my family's wealth, the Beacon Hill mansion, the social standing, the inheritance that would have made my life so much easier. I look around my small condo, filled with photos of David, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. I think about the students I've taught over the years, the music we've made, the lives we've touched. I think about 43 years of waking up next to someone who loved me completely, who never tried to change me, who thought I was enough exactly as I was. I lost a father who valued appearances over his daughter's happiness. I lost a mother who was too weak to stand up to her husband's prejudice. I lost a legacy of wealth and social position. But I gained everything that actually matters. If I could go back to 1966, knowing everything I know now, knowing about the poverty, the struggle, the pain of being cut off from my family, the years of sending letters that would never be answered, would I make a different choice? I look at the photo on my piano, David and me on our wedding day, holding hands in front of Cambridge City Hall. We're both so young, so hopeful, so blissfully unaware of the challenges ahead. But we're smiling, really smiling, with our whole hearts. Number. I wouldn't change a thing. Because here's what I've learned in 79 years. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose you, who stand by you, who love you even when, especially when, that love costs them something. David chose me every day for 43 years. My children chose to build lives of compassion and acceptance. My grandchildren are growing up in a world where love isn't bound by race or class or prejudice. That's my legacy. Not the Whitmore family name or fortune, but a different kind of inheritance. The courage to follow your heart, the strength to stand alone if necessary, the wisdom to know that love is always worth fighting for. My great-granddaughter Lily video called me yesterday. She's 7 years old with my eyes and David's smile and a beautiful blend of east and west in her features. She played a piece for me on her little keyboard, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but she's just starting. Great-Grandma Lizzie, she said, my teacher says I'm good at piano. Maybe I'll be a piano teacher like you when I grow up. Maybe you will, sweetheart, I said. Or maybe you'll be a doctor like your grandfather Michael, or a therapist like your grandmother Sarah, or maybe something we haven't even imagined yet. The important thing is that you choose what makes your heart sing. Did you choose piano because it made your heart sing? I chose piano because I loved it. But I chose Great-Grandpa David because I loved him more. Was he nice? He was the kindest, most wonderful man in the world. I wish I could have met him. Me too, baby. Me too. After we hung up, I sat at my piano and played. Not Chopin this time, but a piece David had composed for me in 1968, while I was pregnant with Michael. He'd called it Lizzie's Song, a simple melody that wove together Western and Eastern musical traditions, just like our love had woven together two different worlds. My hands aren't as nimble as they once were. I hit wrong notes sometimes, and the arthritis makes the fast passages difficult. But I play it anyway, because every note is a memory, every phrase a prayer of gratitude for the life I chose. I am Elizabeth Chen. I was Elizabeth Whitmore. I was disowned for marrying for love, and I never saw my parents again. I lost a fortune, a family legacy, a place in society, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. Because in the end, love is the only inheritance that matters. Everything else is just noise.